Which test is easier, the IELTS, CELPIP, or PTE Core? I get this question every single day. And if you're asking yourself that, you're likely in the position that you've either taken the test many times and you're still stuck at a CLB 8 or lower. You've spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on tests and you just want an answer. So in this 4-part series, I'm going to break down the different exam sections so that you can finally take your next test confidently. If you haven't met me before, hi, I'm Maria. I'm a certified Canadian CELPIP expert. I've also worked with the IELTS test and PTE Core for over a decade. I've worked as an examiner for numerous English proficiency tests, and I have helped thousands of students achieve the results that they need to get their permanent residencies in Canada. This will be part 1 of a 4-part series, so stay tuned for more. So let's get into it. Today, we're going to be talking about the speaking test and the major differences between the IELTS, CELPIP, and PTE Core. And specifically, I'm going to break down 5 key differences. Now, the truth is, no test is necessarily easier than the other because they're all scaled against the Canadian language benchmark, the CLB. So number 1 is human versus computer-based testing. On the IELTS general training test, even if you take the computer-based version, you are still going to be assessed with a real examiner in a live one-on-one conversation. Many students have expressed that they find the IELTS speaking test to be much more natural because they have the opportunity to connect with a real human and to have a real conversation, and that they don't have to look at a timer while they're speaking. As a result, they end up performing better on the IELTS speaking test. The CELPIP and the PTE Core tests are held on a computer, meaning you're going to record yourself and speak directly with a computer, not a human. Now, the CELPIP test does have human examiners behind the scenes assessing those speaking recordings. In fact, they'll have between 3 to 5 speaking examiners listen to your prompts to make sure that you get a fair assessment. The PTE Core, in fact, uses AI to assess your responses. Now, what you need to consider is, how do you prefer to speak? Do you perform better when you are speaking with a real human in a natural conversation? Or are you comfortable speaking with a computer, recording yourself and thinking on the spot? Which leads to my next point, number 2, the timer and fast thinking. When you take a computer-based test like the CELPIP or the PTE Core, the timer is incredibly important. Not only do you have a short amount of time to read and understand the question, you have a set amount of time to respond. This is when timed practice really matters. And on top of that, the PTE Core includes what are called integrated tasks, where you'll have to read, listen, and speak all within the speaking test. On the other hand, the IELTS test does not have a timer that you have to manage. Yes, in part 2 of the IELTS speaking test, there is what's called the long-term 2-minute speaking prompt. However, the examiner is responsible for managing that time for you. All you need to do is to keep going. In my personal experience, I've helped hundreds of students and students who have taken all 3. I have noticed that the timer can be a challenge, especially on the PTE Core, to think on the spot. But the more you practice, the better you will get and the more confident you will feel. Number 3 is a difference that I believe gets often overlooked, and that is the test environment. When you take a computer-based test, you are in a room with other test takers, and some other test takers might be speaking or typing while you're trying to think of ideas and speak. Students of mine have said that this has been a little bit distracting. The IELTS speaking test is held in a room, private room between you and examiner. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and you don't have to worry about other people around you in case that makes you feel a little bit more nervous. Now, keep in mind that IELTS examiners, and all examiners really, want you to do well, so never be scared of the examiners, although I know it's a nerve-wracking experience. So this is when understanding the difference between test format can really impact your results. If you prefer to speak with a computer, maybe that just makes you feel safer, more confident, more comfortable, then the CELPIP speaking test or the PTE Core could be a better fit for you. Now, if you prefer speaking with a real person, then the IELTS speaking test would be a better fit for you. Number 4 is predictability and topics. When you take any of these tests, it's very important for you to know what to expect. On the IELTS test, there are 3 different test sections, and on the CELPIP, there are 8. As mentioned before, the PTE Core includes those integrated tasks, so it's not just about your speaking, but what matters is you know what's coming. In terms of predictability, the CELPIP test, because it's a Canadian English language test, will include Canadian themes and topics. Remember, the purpose of these tests is to assess your confidence, your efficiency in everyday life communication. So that's at your workplace and with your friends and family. So the questions you're going to see on the CELPIP test, they're fairly standard real life scenarios. Nothing's going to be about brain science or rocket science. You can trust that you'll have either lived the experiences in the questions or that you can imagine them if you haven't. The IELTS speaking test, this is an international English language test. They will have questions that will draw on your life experience and your hobbies, and there is a more analytical component to it. The PTE Core is far more generic. You're going to, for example, read a prompt and say it back. So it's not necessarily about Canada. If you are in Canada and your goals are to immigrate here, the CELPIP topics will be more relevant to you. Number 5, creativity. As I just mentioned, on the IELTS test, there are 3 prompts. Part 1 is all about your hobbies. Part 2 is a 2-minute question about something likely in your past or your opinion on something. And then part 3, they dive a little bit deeper into the same topic that you just spoke about in part 2. It's an analytical discussion. Now, because the test asks questions about your hobbies, your opinions, your life experiences, students have told me that it's a lot more natural to come up with ideas and to develop them with examples from their real life. Now, on the CELPIP test, you have 8 tasks, and on some of the tasks, you have to speak directly to somebody. In some tasks, you don't have to speak to anybody. However, you do have to be creative and to think on the spot. You'll be expected to put yourself in hypothetical situations. It might be that you have to give advice to somebody, or that you have to have a difficult conversation, or to convince somebody to agree with you. Now, maybe you have had that life experience in the question, but maybe the topic is really out of your comfort zone. That's why I strongly recommend practicing top topics that might appear on your CELPIP test or on your IELTS test, which we cover in our classes. The PTE Core, as mentioned, it's far more general. It will include listening prompts and reading prompts that you will repeat back or summarize as an example. So those are 5 major differences between the IELTS, CELPIP, and PTE Core speaking tests. I hope they've helped you decide which test is best for you. If you still have questions or you still don't know which test is right for you, get in touch with our team here at EnglishForCanada.com. Our team has over a decade of experience helping students prepare for their IELTS, CELPIP, PTE Core with over 250 5-star reviews. Book a complimentary consultation and we'll be able to answer your questions and to get you started with the right path. Right here in the description below. Stay tuned for part 2 of this 4-part series where we break down the differences between the IELTS, CELPIP, and PTE Core writing tests. See you later.